Ang headline inflation o pagtaas ng presyo ng mga produkto at serbisyo sa bansa ay bumilis sa antas na 6.4% nitong Hulyo. Ang dahilan ng mas mataas na antas ng inflation nitong Hulyo 2022 ay ang mas mabilis na pagtaas ng presyo ng food and non-alcoholic beverages.
I understand that these were projected even before, given the inputs due to the international events that have led to the increase in the prices of petroleum. So all of this had been factored.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Sean Yao. The big story tonight.
Philippine inflation sizzled to its fastest pace in nearly 4 years in July.
Because of this, some businesses are resorting to shrinkflation or reducing the sizes of their products to be able to keep their profit margins. Shyla Francisco with the big story.
This karinderya in Quezon City increased their meal prices by 10 pesos to keep up with high commodity prices.
Kawawa naman kami. Walang nang pagtaas ng bilihin ngayon. Sobra. Sa mga customer na hindi nakakaintindi ng gano'ng kamahalan, parang hindi man sila namamalengke ng gano'n.
The Philippine Statistics Authority says higher prices in restaurants, cafes, and eateries contributed to the overall inflation in July, which zoomed to 6.4%, the fastest pace since October 2018. It is higher compared to the 6.1% in June and the 3.7% recorded in the same month last year. A closer look, however, shows that inflation in Metro Manila is down, mainly due to lower electricity and LPG costs. Overall, the recent back-to-back oil price rollbacks were not enough to temper the rise in prices of other commodities.
Mataas pa rin yung inflation rate doon year on year at pumasok na ngayon yung pag-increase sa jeepney fare na ito yung medyo malaki yung weight sa ating basket.
Amid high inflation rate, the PSA is also looking into the so-called shrinkflation. This is after some businesses were reported to be reducing the sizes of their product offers.
Yung concept ng shrinkflation ay makikita natin dito sa mga restaurants, cafeterias, ano. So dito natin tinitingnan and I've instructed already our data collectors to also look at some observations.
Economist Michael Ricafort said this is one way for businesses to still keep their profit margins.
Pag tinaas mo yung presyo, syempre mata-turn off yung mga mamimili, di ba? Ano yan? Yung iba yung reaction pag makita mo na biglang tataas yung presyo. Yung burden, isi-share yung burden among the producers, sa mga negosyante, pati dito sa mga consumer, di ba? Sa general public. So, gano'n lang. Wini-way lang naman talaga mabuti.
Ricafort says the high prices of goods could be temporary as costs of fuel and other raw materials have started to subside. Ricafort expects prices to stabilize by November this year. Shyla Francisco, we are One News.
The administration of former President Rodrigo Duterte left an outstanding national debt of 12.79 trillion pesos. This is a nearly 15% rise compared to the debt record set last year. It also reflects a doubling in government's almost 6 trillion pesos outstanding loans at the start of Duterte's term. Recall that the ex-president, had an expansionary fiscal policy to fund its build projects. The government further sank into debt to support its COVID-19 response. And here to talk to us more about the latest inflation print and the impact of government's outstanding debt is One News business editor Regina Lay. Regina, welcome to the big story.
Hi, Reg.
Thanks, Robbie. Hi, Sean.
So, Reg, what do you think? Has inflation actually peaked? Meaning, is this it? And should we start to see it going down? Economists seem to be pretty split on this matter.
That's absolutely right, Sean. They are pretty divided. I'm going to give it to you straight. It does look like we're in for higher prices for the rest of the year. Even the Bangko Central is saying that. And most of the analysts, I have to say, that we've talked to say that we're not at the peak yet. May tataas pa ang mga presyo. So some are saying that it could peak in October or November, but it's really hard to predict at this point kasi nga, as the story earlier pointed out, a lot of this is still due to the fallout from the war in Ukraine.
Okay, now, Reg, of course, while people try to figure out what that means for their homes and their own spending. What does it mean for the economy as a whole? President Marcos was, he gave some targets and some projections on where we might be, but what will all of this mean for growth?
Robbie, the short answer is it's going to be that much harder to hit the growth targets, right? So for example, when you look at inflation pa lang, wala na tayo sa target that the government had set. The original target was what? 2 to 4%. Ngayon, ang average natin for the whole year is 4.7 na. And again, July alone was 6.4%, right? So it's good to have these targets, but remember that they're also just guideposts, right, towards what we're, in terms of what we're working towards. The other big impact, of course, is rate hikes. We are expecting further rate hikes this month. Governor Medalla has already indicated that they're ready to raise interest rates again. They're meeting, by the way, on August 18. Again, the analysts are telling us that they expect at least 50 basis points increase, even though last month they already did a surprise increase of 75 basis points. So hindi pa kasya yung surprise rate hike. So now they have to move more aggressively, Robbie.
All right, we have seen, though, that 75 basis point surprise rate hike, it has tempered, the peso somewhat. Regina, moving forward, though, with another rate hike, what does this mean for the average consumer? I mean, prices are high. The dollar has been also, the U.S. Fed, rather, has also been very, very hawkish. Locally, the BSP has already signaled its hawkishness as well. But what does this really all mean?
Look, it means that the Bangko Sentral is really trying to discourage spending, right? Because the interest rates are the primary mechanism by which the government can control inflation. That is the biggest, the biggest tool in the shed, basically. It means that it's going to be that much more expensive to take out car loans, housing loans, credit card loans, all sorts of loans, right? So again, the idea here is to discourage spending so that prices in turn don't shoot up so fast, so high.
Okay, but what about national debt? What options are left for government given the debt that they already inherited from President Duterte? What are the options here?
You ask the hard questions, Robbie. The debt that we are seeing right now is inherited, as you said. There is no option but to keep incurring debt because obviously the economy still has to run, right? President Marcos still has to make sure roads are built and airports and classrooms, even though we're deep in debt. One thing I would point out, I guess, it's important to note that not all debt is bad, right? Just like if you borrowed money to buy a house, you're gaining an asset at least, right? So as long as you're able to pay off the monthly amortizations, you're good, right? So same with the economy, as long as we can keep up with our repayments, as long as the revenue base through taxes keeps growing, then the creditors aren't worried. At the moment, yung national debt to total national debt to GDP is sitting at about 63.5%, which is a little high, a little above the recommended level. But so far, none of the foreign creditors or institutions are hitting the alarm button at the moment. So again, yung goal ng government is to try to get that down to about 60. So from 63.5 to 60%, that's not too far off. That goal is set for 2025. That's going to be very tricky to try to bring down the national debt, at the same time growing the economy while the peso is weak.
That's right. Certainly quite a tricky balancing act right there. Thank you so much for your time. One News Business Editor Regina Lay. Thanks, Reg. Join us in the conversation. Our big question tonight: how should the Marcos administration deal with the debt left by former President Duterte? Share your thoughts on our Facebook and YouTube live stream or post a tweet with the hashtag #TheBigStory. We'll read some of your comments later on in the program. Right after this break, Let's discuss the latest COVID-19 situation in the Philippines amid the rising global COVID infections. We'll be speaking with health reform advocate Dr. Tony Leachon and infectious disease expert Dr. Ronjean Solante. Keep it here on One News.
Batid ko na hindi madali ang ating pinagdaraanan sa nakaraang higit na 2 taon. Alam ko rin na ang bawat isa sa inyo ay ginagawa ang lahat ng inyong makakaya upang patuloy na harapin ang lahat na pagsubok sa kasalukuyan. I do not intend to diminish the risks and the challenges that we face in this turbulent time in global history. And yet, I see sunlight filtering through these dark clouds. We have assembled the best Filipino minds to help navigate us through this global crisis. We will endure. Let our Philippines
You're watching the big story here on One News. COVID-19 cases have been rising around the world, and experts attribute this to the new Omicron subvariants. Here's what we know. Some companies in Japan have temporarily closed or suspended operations. This is due to the new COVID-19 wave, which is said to be caused by the Omicron subvariants BA.4 and BA.5. Like Japan, Australia has also been having a hard time dealing with the new wave of the Omicron subvariant. COVID-19 infections in the country have swept through aged care facilities and strained hospitals. In the U.S., the daily average for COVID-19 cases remains close to 130,000. U.S. President Joe Biden himself recently tested positive for the virus again. And as for the Philippines, health experts say the BA.5 remains the dominant variant in the country. Earlier today, the health department recorded 104 new Omicron subvariant cases, 95 of which were BA.5 cases.
Well, it seems like the new variant, the BA.5, no, I think it's the more predominant variant now that we have in the country. But maybe, as to whether it can cause severe COVID-19, I think it will still depend upon the individual that is being infected. No?
Here to give us more details about the ongoing COVID-19 surge in the Philippines, we have with us health reform advocate Dr. Tony Leachon and infectious disease expert Dr. Ronjin Solante. They're joining us live via Zoom. Good evening, Dr. Solante and Dr. Leachon. Welcome once again to The Big Story.
Good evening.
Good evening, Robbie.
Good evening. Hi, Jean.
Dr. Leachon, let's go straight to this BA.5 subvariant. It's the latest. It's also supposedly, we suspect, possibly the dominant variant right now. But being newest, being most dominant, is that necessarily cause for concern?
Well, it's actually a subvariant of concern right now. Not only BA.5, but the other subvariants like BA.4 and the latest 2.75. Because of the limitations of the PGC or the Philippine Genomic Center, and of course the lack of funds here, we cannot do all these surveillance tests. The other thing is that the report may be underreported, although Jeet can talk about it, because we're recording most on RT-PCR and not the rapid antigen test. But on the ground, as we see patients, we see a lot of patients on telemedicine. And then slowly, the healthcare utilization rate is going up as well. The positivity rate is 18.4%. So what's driving the increase in the surge right now, I think it's the arrival of the subvariants, which maybe the cases are actually increasing, the waning immunity as well, the low percentage of our booster rate, peg around 15%. And of course, the inadvertent non-adherence of our countrymen to the wearing of masks and everything, perhaps because of economy as well as the calamity related to the earthquake and other things. So it's actually a confluence of a lot of things. And mainly it's the subvariants that is driving the surge right now.
Okay, but Dr. Solante, nabanggit ni Dr. Leachon in particular, one of those factors also waning immunity and still the slow uptake of Filipinos for their booster shots. But just isolating that factor, how big of a factor is that in the grand scheme of things?
It's really big, Robbie, because you have here a subvariant that evades antibodies from vaccines. Let's do the math. If 70% are already vaccinated with the primary vaccine, you're not protected. You'll still get the BA.5. Now, are you getting or will you be getting the severe infection? That's a question mark. If only 19 million are boosted, you can still get the BA.5. So, in totality, most of those infected now are already vaccinated. Even in some, they are boosted. It's really this way because this is BA.5 and protection from vaccination drop as low as 30% with your primary vaccine. Even if you're boosted, protection drops to 60%. But at this point in time with BA.5, your protection against severe infection is maintained at between 65 to 70%. And that's still a good rate. No? And I think it's critical, Robbie, to monitor the healthcare utilization because as cases goes up, a lot of these people will really be going to the hospital, and we would expect the vulnerable population. So what is really needed here, okay? If you want to look at this as something like endemic, we need to have measures that are accessible to people in terms of treatment, in terms of diagnostics, in terms of care, because as long as they are not into the hospital 4 to 5 days with the symptoms, they can go back to work, and I think the population will be fine.
All right, that's another tricky question. We were just talking about the state of the economy. In a way, COVID helped us get to this state of the economy, Dr. Leachon and Solante. Are we supposed to, what do we do right now? With the healthcare utilization rate going up slowly, the surge has also been going on slowly, but surely it is a sort of a quote-unquote prolonged surge. What do we do in terms of balancing the economy and our, healthcare capabilities?
I think we have to remember the marching order of the president, no lockdowns. And we, the Advisory Council on Experts, we are right now one group. We are in agreement with this, but there are, personal responsibilities and responsibilities that cannot be done by the ordinary Filipino citizen. What I'm saying by personal responsibilities that you can actually test and, of course, trace and isolate, and then treat this as an ordinary flu, and then just go back to the office and all. But remember, even if you are not hospitalized, then family activities as well as workplace, disrupted ka pa rin. Disruptive. And magka nagkasakit ka, yung productivity and quality of life mo, ganun din. Then eventually, if a lot of people are sick outside of the hospital, ang mangyayari dyan, you have a sick economic workforce. Wag mo nang ibilang dito yung long COVID syndrome. So, ang dapat gawin dito sa next 100 days, I think dapat mabakunahan ka agad, mabooster ka agad, para sa ganon, maging resilient ang Filipino population. But I see right now, after the son of the president last July 25, wala akong makitang clear roadmap as well as, clear roadmap as well as the detailed vaccination program. Akala ko nga magkakaroon ng one vaccination week so that we can ramp up on the booster because it is a rate limiting step to the face-to-face classes in November as well as the December business activities. And apparently, hindi natin na-achieve to. So this is something that the President should do right now. Call the cabinet a meeting, all hands on deck, partner with the business sector, and then do the boosting right away, as mentioned by Dr. Solante. Ayun ang dapat natin gawin. Kasi parang bahala na kung kailan tayo matapos na sa boosting So yun ang tingin ko dito.
Hey, Dr. Leachon, how will that go? Itong what you were hoping to hear, not just a strategy, but even specifically you were saying maybe we could have called for a 1-week special push, special program, week-long for everybody to but on the ground, what will that look like?
Well, ang tingin ko is, in fairness to the previous administration, very successful in December vaccination program ni Secretary Carlito Galvez. If you remember nun, Jean, around 15 million na nabakunahan na nun And that hybrid immunity, yung vaccine plus yung Omicron last January, yun na nag-contribute kaya mababa ang cases natin for 6 months until nag-wane yung immunity. We should not reinvent the wheel, gayahin lang yun. And then all hands on deck para sa ganon matapos itong problema natin. Ang problema lang natin kasi na nakita ko, nag-expire yung vaccines na dapat nating gamitin. So we should have an inventory of the expiring, the expired, and the active one because ang problema nito access Kahit sabihin mo sa mga LGU na magbakuna, wala ka naman palang ibabakuna. So hindi clear sa lahat ng tao on the inventory of the vaccines.
I mean, Dr. Solante, nabanggit ni Dr. Leachon, an inventory para malaman natin yung access din, no? But apart from access, especially because we mentioned also the expiration of a batch of vaccines, other than access, is there a supply issue at this point?
Well, I'm not so sure if there is a supply issue with most of the vaccines are expiring. That can be another issue later on that we will be facing. But again, I totally agree with Tony that the access then during the time was an issue also. And in fact, I see some patients telling us that they were in the center, they were looking for this vaccine, but it's not available because the only available for the booster is this and this, and it's not available. So something like that. So I think on the part of the government, when we implemented the first booster and the second booster, we were recommending all vaccines can be used as booster, okay? Not only the mRNA, but what happened is that only the mRNA vaccines were being used, and I think that's why a lot of Astra vaccines expired. No? So sayang din. Okay. So these are some of the important issues on the ground. Bakit may na-expire at hindi nabakunahan lahat? So more on the supply issue and implementation problem.
Okay, maraming salamat po, Dr. Tony Leachon, Dr. Ronjin Solante. More stories after the break. Keep it here on One News.
As for the horror stories that we have heard about the poor quality of educational materials and supplies that are being given to our schools, this must end. Our children must always be equipped with the best that we can provide. Ang edukasyon ay ang tangi nating pamana sa ating mga anak na hindi mawawaldas. Kaya anumang gastusin sa kanilang pag-aaral ay hindi tayo nagtitipid. Hindi rin tayo nagtatapon. And once again, I am not talking about history or what is being taught. I am talking about materials that are necessary for effective teaching in this day and age. Children now need connectivity to the internet. They need devices to use. They need computers, educational tools. So that they might participate fully in the digital community here and abroad. We must do better in the international rankings, especially when it comes to the so-called STEM subjects: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. These skills, this knowledge, are necessary for our young people to be able to compete in a highly technological and competitive world. The raw talent is there in our young people. It is up to our educational system to develop and to refine that great pool of talent. As for the horror stories that we have heard about the poor quality of educational materials and supplies that are being given to our schools, this must end. Our children must always be...
You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
Let's now take a look back at our big question tonight. How should the Marcos administration deal with the nearly 12.8 trillion peso debt left by former President Duterte? Here's what netizens had to say. One commenter says Marcos Jr. should start by paying off his family's 203 billion peso unsettled real estate tax. But others believe that the new administration will only raise the government's current debt pile.
Meanwhile, Juni pointed out that the Philippines is not the only country incurring more debt. RM argued, however, that the borrowings of the Duterte administration is more than double the debt of the 5 administrations before him. You may also join the conversation. Simply use the hashtag #TheBigStory and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at OneNewsPH. Like earlier, comments or tweets will be featured as part of our agenda to include you, the public, in the big story.
And that's the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, The Philippine Star, and Business World online. You may also log on to onenews.ph for more in-depth analysis. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
The Big Story is also available via Signal Play. Make a free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. Ako naman si Sean Yao. Masks on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.